Are you seriously fired up about growing as a leader in business or church-based ministry? Are you feeling somewhat frustrated about not having realized your full potential in what you've been called to do? Could you do with someone to help you get some extra clarity or to be a sounding board for your plans and ideas? Great athletes have coaches, so do great leaders. The right leadership coach for you will result in an increased sense of clarity, direction, and purpose, dramatically increasing the results you achieve. If you're ready to step up, contact Errol to book a free, no-obligation, introductory coaching session and see whether Errol is the right coach for you. Errol takes the lessons learned from his own leadership journey and from his extensive research to help leaders and entrepreneurs to step into their biggest challenges and rise to their next level. Email admin@errollawson.com right now to schedule your call.
Hello and welcome again to the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast with me, Errol Lawson, and our special guest today is Chris Widener. Chris Widener is widely recognized as one of the top speakers in the world today. He's spoken all over the world in places like Germany, Spain, Russia, China, Egypt, Singapore, Australia, and of course all over the United States and Canada. Chris speaks to groups as small as 100 and as large as 25,000 people. His clients are a who's who of American businesses and organizations, including notables like General Electric, Cisco Systems, Microsoft, and the Harvard Business School. His dynamic, practical, and engaging speeches will have your audience laughing 1 minute and learning timeless truths of success the next. Chris, I know I could say so much more about your bio. Is absolutely full of stuff, right? We're so glad to have you today, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. You know, I do a lot of these podcasts and interviews, and I especially love the ones where we get to talk to Christian leaders who are out making a difference on behalf of the kingdom of God. So I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you and talk about some very important things.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Well, first of all, Chris, fill in any gaps in your bio there, anything you think I've missed out, and give us a glimpse into what you're up to in the world right now.
Well, interestingly enough, one of the things that a lot of people don't know about me, they know that I've traveled the world and worked with guys like Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar and John Maxwell. And what a lot of them don't know is that I was a pastor for 14 years.
Wow.
In the Christian and Missionary Alliance. And then I began to write and speak full time back in 2002. But from 1988 to 1991, I was a youth pastor. And from 1991 until 2002, I was a pastor of a local church. And out of that local church, we started 2 other churches. So I was a church planter starting at the age of 25. And so very entrepreneurial. Even when I was in the ministry, I was starting churches.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Well, let's tell us your origin story then. Tell us how there's some key steps there. So obviously you went into ministry, youth pastor, then leading a church. And then you transitioned now into this world outside of kind of, the 4 walls of the church. Tell us, how did you get into ministry, and then how do you transition out of ministry? I'd love to hear that story.
Well, I had a crazy upbringing. My dad died when I was 4, and he had, in 1969, the last full year that he was alive, he made $90,000 US, which is about $1 million a year now. Right. But he only had $30,000 worth of life insurance. So we ended up we went from a very wealthy, affluent family to a lower middle class family almost overnight. And I began to act out and get in trouble. Long story short, I lived in 28 homes. I went to 11 different schools. My mom shipped me off to live with relatives twice, once in the 3rd grade, once in the 9th grade. I got in trouble at school a lot. I made most of my money as a teenager betting the horses at the local Longacres horse track. And I began drugs in the 6th grade, smoked opium for the first time in the 8th grade. You're getting a picture here that I was going nowhere fast. And thankfully, the Lord reached into my life summer before my senior year of high school, and I became a Christian. I ended up going to Bible college and was ordained into the ministry in 1988. In the Christian and Missionary Alliance, and spent 3 years as a youth minister, and then 11 years as a church planter, and started 3 churches. And I think what really transitioned me out, a couple of things really sort of came together. Number one, my denomination didn't have any money for me to start my churches. So I had to have a tent-making job of some sort. So I started a publishing company, and I began to write for that publishing company, gained a little bit of a following, and built an email list when the internet started and got going. And the other thing that happened was, while I was writing, I saw a book by, I think it was by Deepak Chopra, and it was called 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. Somebody gave it to me and asked me what I thought of it, and I read it. And one of the first things I read said that one of the keys to success is to realize that you are God. And I thought, where are all the Christians who should be talking about success? Because the word success is used 41 times in the Bible. It's not that God is against success, it's just that God has a unique definition of success. And so I thought, instead of having people tell people that you are God, which is infinitely not true, and in fact, heresy and the root of all sin, I thought it would be good if there was somebody who would be out there teaching biblical principles of success and what God's plan and design was. So I began to write about those things. And from there, I started being asked to speak. Even while I was a pastor, I was speaking at places like Microsoft, General Electric, Cisco Systems, Harvard Business School. And then in 2002, I went to the elders of our church and I said, I really think God is opening this door up for me. What do you think? And we prayed about it for 90 days. They came back, and to a man on our elder board, they all said, we think God's really opening this door for you. I said, okay, great. What do we do? And they said, well, why don't you resign? Give us 6 weeks. We'll throw you a big party, and you can go on your way. And I said, all right, awesome. And that's what happened in 2002. And from there, I began to work with John Maxwell, one of the great leaders in the leadership arena, and then Jim Rohn, of course, and ended up with a television show with Zig Ziglar. And God has really just blessed it.
Wow, praise God, praise God. Have you ever been tempted back into ministry?
Well, okay, let's argue semantics here a little bit, Errol.
Yeah,
I never left the ministry.
Okay.
I never left the ministry. The people say to me, why'd you leave the ministry? I say, I never left the ministry. My ministry is bigger now than it ever has been.
It's a really good point, because
professional ministry. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm really not. Number one, because I know it's not my calling. I think about it, and I've told the Lord, if you want me to do it, I'll do it. I'm down to do whatever you want me to do, God. I don't think it's what God wants me to do. But if God showed up and said, do it, and it was confirmed, I would certainly do it. But I got to tell you, especially to the men who are listening to this, who are pastors, the men and women in ministry, I tell people all the time, being a pastor of a local church is the hardest job in the world. You're not paid much. You're not recognized much. You live in a fishbowl. There's very little reward that in terms of what people would typically think of as a reward. You have the greatest reward, the honor of the Lord and a special place in his heart. But it's a tough job. And then you throw on top of all that spiritual attack, and you realize that it's I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. What I'm doing now is a lot easier, and I respect the men and women who are in professional full-time ministry. It's pretty special.
Awesome. And was there, like, on your journey, has there been like a significant turning point, a revelation you maybe received, and maybe you were heading in one direction in your leadership journey, and something happened that caused you to go in a completely different direction? Can you tell us that story?
Well, yeah, I can tell you the transition out of being a full-time pastor. I was reading a book. Somebody gave me the book or encouraged me to read the book called The Journey of Desire by John Eldridge. And, of course, John is known most for writing the book Wild at Heart. Wild at Heart was the third book in a trilogy. Sacred Romance was the first. Journey of Desire was the second. And the third was Wild at Heart. And I believe the best of those three books is Journey of Desire. And about halfway through the book, my wife asked me, how do you like the book? I said, I like the book, and I know how it ends already. And she says, what do you mean? I said, it ends with me not in full-time ministry anymore. Because I realized that my desire was to take my writing and my speaking skills to the secular world from a Christian worldview, and to be that winsome character toward the world to attract them to Christ. And that's exactly what happened. Shortly thereafter, I resigned my pastorate and ended up as a full-time speaker.
And what's been the biggest challenge so far in that leadership journey? I'm sure there's been many.
The greatest challenge, um, I
Hello?
in the
Hello?
secular
Sorry,
marketplace.
just lost you there, Chris. Just, can you say that again for us, please?
Yes, I think the biggest challenge is how to best represent Christ in a secular marketplace. So, when you're invited to come in and speak to a corporation, they're not inviting you to come in and have an altar call.
Yeah.
They're not inviting you to come in and preach the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So what I try to find the balance is to tell my story, not in a heavy-handed way, but to tell my story from a Christian worldview. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I do is I try to get so close to the edge in regard to that after my speech, a Christian will come up to me and say, "Hey, are you a Christian?"
Yeah.
And I always answer the same way. "Yes, I am, and you're an answer to prayer." And they say, "Why am I an answer to prayer?" And I say, "I pray that I will walk so closely to the message without going over the line that it will be clear to the people in the room that I'm a Christian." And the fact that you came up and asked me that answers my prayer that I accomplished that today.
Wow. I can completely relate to that challenge. I've been in ministry a few years myself, and my ministry now is outside the church, and I'm speaking in places where you don't get to be, obviously Christian in what you're sharing, but it can be a challenge sometimes because you really want to represent Christ, right? And
Yeah.
you're making a difference, you're sowing seeds, you're impacting lives, transforming lives, but you're not blatantly saying Jesus Christ is Lord. And there's that, sometimes that can be a bit of a, God, am I doing enough for you? But those moments where someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, are you a Christian? I knew you were a Christian." Really, really powerful, really powerful.
Yeah.
We so we've done over 100 of these interviews now, and initially it was a piece of research from my latest leadership book, which is called the 5 Core Abilities of Highly Effective Leaders. And from these over 100 interviews, we've now written the book. The book's out there, bestseller on Amazon, and we found out that there were 5 things that the leaders that we interviewed were all really great at. What the first of them, this is our kind of our 5 core abilities section right here. The first ability is the ability to create and communicate vision. How have you created and communicated your vision for your business or ministry? What was your process? What is your process?
Well, I have a personal mission statement. My personal mission statement is that I will use my speaking and writing skills to help people turn their potential into performance, succeed in every area of their life, and achieve their dreams. So when I'm approached with opportunities to pursue or to be involved in, it always comes down to that. Will this help me fulfill my personal mission, my personal vision, what God has given me for my life? That being the ability to use my writing and speaking skills to help people turn their potential into performance, succeed in every area of their life, and achieve their dreams. And if it doesn't, if it's not going to involve my writing and speaking skills, then that's the first indication that it's probably not something that I should be involved in.
How did you come up with that statement?
Well, I think that, particularly as Christians, we understand spiritual gifts. And, I have the spiritual gift of speaking and writing. I'm obviously good at it. I mean, my books have sold over 3 million copies and people resonate with them. And so I know that I want to be someone who uses his gifts, and that God gave me those gifts for a reason, to use them and to use them to build his kingdom and to further his kingdom. And so why would I spend my time doing something that doesn't utilize my gifts and further the kingdom?
Sure. The second ability is the ability to create and manage wealth. How did you make your first dollar, if you like, in business? How did you do it?
Well, I was an entrepreneur from the time I was a kid. And the way I made money as a kid was I bought and sold athletics tickets outside of sporting events in Seattle. I started with the Seattle Mariners, and the Seattle Mariners are the professional baseball team. And I would go to the baseball games, and I would buy some tickets, and then I'd stand out on the street corner, and I'd sell them. And then I'd take the profit from that, and I'd buy some more tickets. I'd turn around and sell them. And so I've always been entrepreneurial, whether it was as a kid or in the church as a pastor, as a church planter, or, going out and starting other businesses. So that was the first thing that I did. The very first thing that I did to make money was buying and selling tickets to athletics games.
That's great. And then the third is about productivity and the ability to focus on the key things and eliminate or delegate the rest. Do you have like a process or an activity that you use, or an app even, to help you increase your productivity? How do you do?
What I use is the old Stephen Covey, first things first, getting rid of the urgent, getting rid of the unimportant, and focusing on the important, and doing it so passionately and focused that none of it ends up being urgent. And so what I do is when something needs to be done, I do it. I don't wait till tomorrow. I don't put it off. I get it done when it needs to be done. And I just think the biggest problem for most people is procrastination. They put off something they should have done today, and then it becomes urgent tomorrow, and then they rush it, or they don't get it done on time, and then they get into trouble. So when something needs to be done, you do it. The other thing that I would say is do a little bit a day. I just started 2 days ago. I started my 18th book, writing my 18th book. And people say, how have you written so many of those books? I say, it's actually really easy. One word at a time. Mm-hmm. That's the way you write it. That's the way you write 18 books. One word at a time. Great. It's just that I've spent a lot of time writing words, and other people have not spent a lot of time writing words. I had a very profound moment back in the mid-90s before I wrote as I was writing my first book. I was in the middle of the afternoon. I was a little tired, and I thought, I'm going to go see a movie. So I looked up when the movies were, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go see this movie. And it was middle of the afternoon, 2 or something like that. And as I was driving, I can still remember where I was on the freeway. I thought to myself, I can either go and pay $5 or $6 to watch somebody else's dreams and their work and their writing, or I can get off on this exit, turn around, and go back and write some more of my own story in my own book. And that's exactly what I did. I got off the freeway, went over the overpass, got back on the freeway the other direction, went back to my office and wrote more on my book. Now, doesn't mean that you can't ever go to a movie or that you should only work all the time, but it really just reminded me, I could go and spend 2 hours working, looking at somebody else's dream and their vision, or I can work on my own. And that's what I decided to do.
Love it. And the next one is about confidence. It's about your ability to defy self-doubt and lead with conviction. What's your key to building your confidence and not getting stuck in that trap of the imposter syndrome?
Well, here's an interesting thing. The word confidence, if you break it down, con is a prefix that means with, and fide is from the old Latin term faith. For example, in the Reformation, Martin Luther said sola fide, with faith alone. And so confidence means with faith. So I suggest that this is one of the reasons why my personal mission statement revolves around my speaking and writing skills, because God has given me a gift. It's my gift. Other people, he gives a gift of administration. Other people, he gives a gift of generosity. Other people, he gives a gift of healing. Whatever your gift may be, and every human being has spiritual gifts. If you're operating out of your spiritual gift, you're going to be good at it. And if you're good at it, then you're going to have faith in it. So people will ask me, they'll say, do you ever get nervous speaking in front of a crowd of 20,000 people? And I say, never. I never get nervous speaking to a group of 20,000 people. Why? Because I am good at it. And I'm good at it. Yes, I've worked hard at it. I've developed my skills, but I'm good at it because the Lord made me good at it. And I really honestly believe that. I have a gift. That's my gift. And what I tell people is, if you asked me to sing the national anthem in front of 20,000 people, or paint a picture in front of 20,000 people, I'd be really nervous because I'm no good at it, right? I don't have confidence in my ability to sing well. I don't have confidence in my ability to write, to paint a picture or something like that. I have all the confidence in the world that you can put me on a stage in front of 20,000, it could be 100,000, a 250,000 people, and I wouldn't get nervous because the Lord is working through me with my giftedness, and that is what gives me my confidence.
Great. That's great. Wow. And the fifth ability is the ability to get the best out of the people you lead, whether they like you or not, for that matter. When it comes to building a team for a new business or project, what process works best for you, and what have you tried in the past maybe that didn't work so well? And why?
I'm sorry, can you ask that question one more time? It kind of broke up there.
Sure. So when it comes to building a team for a new business or project, what process works best for you, and what have you tried in the past maybe that didn't work so well, and why?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to get the right people on the team. And of course, over the years, I've found the right people, people that work well with me, people that I find to be competent, those kinds of. Pardon me?
Do you have a team now?
I do not have an in-house team, but I have lots of people that I work with. I have a web developer. I have copywriters. I have those people. They're not employees, but they're people that I contract out.
Sure.
And when I find good ones, I stick with those good ones and I work with them.
Sure. And so how do you select? How do you build? So someone listening right now is thinking about maybe planting a church, or maybe starting a project for their business, and they're thinking about, how do I build a team? How do I get these people around me? What's the process?
Well, first of all, prayer, obviously, and asking the Lord for direction and to open doors. Yeah. But I would say referrals from people who you already know and trust. Yeah. That's how I found my web developer. I've had my web developer for 10 years, and he was recommended to me by a friend.
Wow, brilliant. Awesome. Quick fire round now, Chris. John Maxwell said that the key to your success is hidden in your daily routine. What does the first 90 minutes of your day typically look like?
I get up, I do devotions, I pray, I have coffee, I oftentimes work out, but my day starts with the Lord every day.
Awesome. And are there any other key habits that have contributed towards your success?
Put everything into the calendar and be ruthless about your calendar. Don't put anything into your calendar that isn't going to move you forward, that isn't going to be part of your work that you're supposed to do. And when something's in your calendar, do it. Don't put it off.
And what's your biggest weakness as a leader?
Well, I've always said that your biggest weakness is your biggest strength carried to its extreme. So think about that for a minute. Your biggest weakness is your greatest strength carried to its extreme. Yeah. So if you are really good at analyzing, you will oftentimes, you'll find that your weakness is that you overanalyze.
Right.
If your greatest strength is time management, you will oftentimes miss out on some things that the Spirit is spontaneously leading to you because you are so rigid with your time. Good. For me, my greatest strength is my ability to speak, and my greatest weakness is my ability to speak. I often say things that offend people or hurt people, or, and as I've gotten older, I've tried to tone that down. I've tried to learn from experience, and I believe that I have.
That's great. And who have been your top 3 most significant mentors in your leadership journey up to this point?
One would be one of my first mentors out of college was a guy who was the CEO of Mars Candies, about a $25 billion a year company, familiar with most of their products, I'm sure. He took me under his wing. He was a benefactor when I started my first church. He funded our first church plant with a lot of money. He was a great guy. I would say that Jim Rohn, who I spent the last 7 years of his life working with him, he was a great role model, and I ended up writing his last book, 12 Pillars, with him. And then probably Zig Ziglar. I tell people all the time that Zig Ziglar is the finest man I ever met, and just a lovely Christian man who was also one of the, not only one of the greatest speakers of all time, he was the quintessential motivational speaker of the 20th century.
Yeah, we had his son Tom on our most recent episode, in fact, on the podcast. Let's just dig a bit deeper into those relationships, if that's okay. Um, each of those three people, what is the best single piece of advice you've gotten from each of those people?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me with Mike was his name, the CEO of Mars. It wasn't advice. I oftentimes don't think that it's advice. It's more example. Um, I remember one time I said to Mike, because he was giving me a bunch of money to plant our church, and I had not asked him for any money, but he kept giving me money. And I said, "Why are you giving me money?" And he said, "Because I believe in you." And as a young man, I was 25 years old, starting my first church, to have such a significantly successful man who's running one of the largest companies in the world to say he believed in you. That was like just wind in my wings, right? Wind in my sails, just to push me forward. And then I think what I learned most, that I reflect back on often, because I'm asked this question: what was it like to work with Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar? And I think it was to be myself, to be my unique self. And the reason why is because Jim and Zig were very different people, yet they were two of the greatest speakers of the 20th century and are legends in our industry as motivational speakers. And yet they were very different. Jim was an introvert, quiet, didn't like to hang around with the crowds. And Zig could have been a politician if he wanted to. He would work the crowds and shake hands and kiss babies and slap backs and smile and grin and grip and, all that kind of stuff. Yet they were both at the pinnacle of the industry. And it made me think, you know what? You don't have to be a certain style to be your best. But, you asked me about advice, and I'll tell you, I got some advice from somebody once. I don't even remember who it was. But they said, be a voice, not an echo. And that's the greatest piece of advice I have ever received from anybody. I don't even remember who it was. But they said, be a voice, not an echo. Don't just run around saying what everybody else is saying. Find out what's true, find out what's unique, find out what the Lord's teaching you, and make yourself a voice.
Awesome. And what's the one thing you're most fired up about right now?
I'd say the thing that I'm most fired up about right now is writing my next book, the work that I'm doing with men. In fact, a good friend of mine, Larry Wingett, who's a motivational speaker, he and I just started a podcast called How to Be a Real Man. And people can find us at realmanpodcast.com. But I'm writing a book about 4 men who are 38 years old. They went to high school together, and they're now 20 years out from their high school experience. And they're realizing that they've had a lot of misconceptions about life and work and business and all of those things. And the book is about how they learn those lessons and how they made some assumptions about some things that aren't necessarily true.
Awesome. Hey, we're almost done here now, right? But if there was a book or a resource that you'd recommend for a leader or entrepreneurs listening right now, what would it be and why?
Well, I'd recommend my own books, I guess.
Absolutely.
I may as well.
Plenty of time for that.
There's lots of great books, but 2 leadership books that I've written that have taken me all over the world speaking. And in fact, if anybody on your podcast is looking for a speaker at their event, obviously for ministry events and business events, I'd love to come and speak on leadership. My primary 2 books on leadership are The Art of Influence and The Leadership Rules. And both of them are actually stories. Most of my books are stories, about 20,000 word stories where I teach these life and business lessons in a story format. So The Art of Influence is about a young man who just graduates business school, and he ends up through happenstance being able to spend a week with one of the richest men in America. And then The Leadership Rules is about a guy who gets sent to a small town in Texas where the football coach in the small town has won something like 20 state football championships. And the business leader realizes that he can learn a lot of leadership lessons from this high school football coach. And so that's sort of the story that goes on in that book.
Brilliant. And tell us, so how do we find out about you? How do we plug into your resources, your social media handles, your website address? Give us all that
Sure.
information. Yeah.
Yep, they can find me at chriswidener.com. That's ChrisWidener.com. They can reach me on Facebook at facebook.com/Chris Widener Speaker. That's the same on Instagram. And they can find all of my books and audio programs on both Amazon and Audible if they want to download and listen to them. And then, of course, if they'd like me to come and speak at any events that they're having, would love to do that. They can reach me at widenergroup@gmail.com, widenergroup@gmail.com. I also do personal coaching for people who would like a little edge in their business or their ministry. They can reach me that way as well.
Brilliant. Guys, go and check out Chris Widener's material, his website, social media. Go get the books on Amazon. Be inspired, be lifted up. I follow Chris now, his journey for a few years now. Just through social media and just seeing the work and the content is putting out there, guys. He's the real deal. Go and check him out. All right, Chris, it's been great just connecting with you today, and I really, really appreciate your time, sir. I know how busy you are.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your folks, and hopefully there's been a few things that I've said that will help people realize their best life.
Thank you, man. God bless you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us today on the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast. I pray you've been inspired, you've been lifted, you've been encouraged to take your personal leadership to the next level. We really encourage you guys to just take action, make it happen, do something, start somewhere, go out and change the world in some way, big or small. Guys, if you've enjoyed the podcast today, please share with your friends, share with your loved ones, your colleagues, someone out there you think might benefit from hearing this great content. And if you want some more questions answering, you got a question, email me, Errol@ErrolLawson.com. Or if you want a free 30 to 45 minute coaching session with myself around a leadership challenge or issue you're working on in your business, your church, or in your organization, please feel free to email me right away. We'll get you booked in. It's Errol@ErrolLawson.com. Thank you again for listening. Go to our iTunes page, check it out, check out the previous episodes, give us a nice review, that would be awesome. Really appreciate if you could do that for us. We really appreciate you just for being here and listening. Thank you so much. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Rising Generation.